this is the day that Lord has given us. Let us rejoice and be glad that we're in it. Would you say welcome to everyone around you? Tell them you're glad that they're here, because we certainly are. We are certainly glad that everybody's here. Welcome to the online people that are watching us. We have a larger congregation online, believe it or not, than we have in the church. I keep getting emails and getting phone calls from them, and they're asking us, please use your microphones, because they can't hear it. You guys can hear it, but they can't hear it. So we're going to use the microphones, and Derrick has promised me he's going to help me go out and find a little bit better mics so that people aren't so conscious of them. Okay, so if you just join me in prayer. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for allowing us to join together today. We're so happy with the sunshine and the bright smiles on everybody's face. We know that we are having the highest and best of the information to come through us so that we can go out and spread the good news throughout the world, throughout the week. Amen. Be seated, please. Well, you can see that I'm not Paul Elder. But Paul is on his way. He did phone me from the ferry. What had happened, he's coming from Vancouver Island. Apparently, the ferry that comes to Tawasin doesn't come at the right time for him to get here. He came on the one that's coming into North Vancouver. He arrived at 10 after 10. So he said he would get here as quickly as he can. So the order service is going to be changed so that we give Paul his full time when he gets here. So that's just wonderful. So we'll just kind of welcome everybody that's here, and some of the congregation that, for instance, we have two of our musical ministry here, and Celia, who's playing today, and Jean, who plays for us on the alternative. So I'd like to give them a hand. And we also have Reverend Joyce Lehman. Everybody knows from the other times when we've been here year after year. And Joyce has been a faithful person, helping with the church that was previous to us and helping us for the over 10 years service she has given here. So thanks, Joyce, for being one of our ministers and being here. We also have some familiar faces here, and I welcome all of you. But I would like to introduce the people that don't know to our student ministers that are in training here. These ministerial trainees is Maureen Lum, and also our coordinator, Derrick, Whiteskycloud. And I don't see Lynn here, but she probably, is she at the doors just coming in? And Lynn White. They are training on this Lower Mainland, and we have one online trainee, and that is Dale Haggerty, and she is up in Vavenby. So I'd just like you to know that. And if you just think to yourself, well, how come they've got 4 trainees? Well, they go all over the world. When we get them trained, they don't all stay here. And somebody has to take over for this old lady when she goes over so I can talk to somebody. So that's great. I'd also like to say that we like to appreciate and validate all of you people that have been there. Anybody who has donated to the church through envelopes. There is an envelope on the side table there with a receipt for you. There is a letter inside telling you that our charity number has not been issued yet. Hold the receipt. When you get the charity number, we will contact you and let you know, and you can backdate it and can still use it as a credit on your income tax. So that's great, but it just takes time for the government. 7 months, it's gone on somebody's desk now. And that person that has it on their desk now, you know what's happened? They're never at their phone. They're away from the phone at home. So when we get it, we'll let you know. So that'll be great. I know we'll get it eventually, so all things in divine order. We're going to do things in a little different order. I'm going to do the announcements now because we're going to give Paul time to get here because I don't want to have anything interrupt Paul's talk because this is going to be really wonderful. And the announcements, if you just take a look at your flyer there, one of the biggest announcements is, of course, is that we're having a big bazaar today. We'd like all of the people here to participate. If you craft, if you have any wonderful artwork or anything that you do, please let us know. Reserve a table. We're not going to have that many tables. We're going to have a tea room at the back, a little tea reading, and swan, English swan with Devonshire cream and jam. Doesn't that sound good? And then we're going to have a magician here to entertain the children. The children's stuff is all free except for the food. And we also have George Cook from Magical Children is going to be here doing 2 performances. And we have Rosemary Phillips, for you people that were here when she was here before. She sings along and she talks to the people in the congregation and whatnot, but for the children she's going to do a sing-along with the children, and the next day she's going to come and do the sing-along with us and the mediumship between, she calls it talking and singing to heaven. So you'll have her in at that time on the 18th. So we're also hoping to have a special night of clairvoyance with her. So keep an eye on that. That'll be really great. And next week, of course, we are going to have a speaker that we all know and love, Gloria Bruff. Reverend Gloria Bruff is going to be here. So don't miss coming out and seeing Gloria because all of us miss her since she is not here every week. And when she does come, we hope that everybody will come out. And we would like to ask if there are any people here that have birthdays or anniversaries. Nobody? All this congregation and no birthdays? And no anniversaries? Oh my goodness. My goodness, you're going to get off easy today, so yeah. So maybe what we will do then, we will do number 4. Okay, and we will do, if you turn to number 4, just a closer walk with thee, and we'll put a lot of energy in that, and we'll hope that Paul is on it.
Oh please.
Well, we're going to change the order of service, get everybody confused. You know, keeps you awake when it's not always the same, right? So that's great. So what we will do is we will do the healing part of the service now. And we will ask anybody who would like to have hands-on healing from the healing facilitators to sit in the red chairs at the back. And our healing facilitators will work with you. We will put a meditation tape on. We ask that everybody allow themselves, let that energy come through your body, heal yourself, allow it to go out into the universe and heal the whole universe. And we will do that healing, and it will be about an 8-minute meditation. Of course, we understand that healing, when we do prayer, or somebody phones me and says, would you please put our name in the healing bowl? It's just in healing. You can put the name in there. Okay? And so everybody just quietly stay at the back of the church and I'll put the healing meditation on. I think our guest has arrived. Hi, Paul. Do you want to just join your sister here for a moment? And we're just going to do the meditation, give you time to wind down, and then you can speak. Okay, thank you so much. Position and take your thoughts inward and upward to a little spot in the universe where God resides and healing begins. Allow the energy to move through the tips of your toes, moving upwards, swirling round and round the body, and allow it to come up through the top of the head. As you breathe in again, feel the energy bringing alive all the cells in the body that work together with all of the organs. And allow those organs to be like a wonderful symphony concert orchestra that play their instruments independently, but they play with such harmony and such rhythm that they are working for the whole beauty of the piece they are playing. And as you breathe the energy in and revitalize all of the energies in the body, in the cells, and the organs, know that you are doing that to bring it to the whole. And as the energy comes in again through the tips of the toes, allow it to expand into the mind. Let the mind open and be receptive. Let the mind be positive and be healthy. So that it may touch the dreams, the ideas that God has to make you all that you can be. Allow those dreams, those thoughts, those energies to come through the mind to healthy growth, so that they will grow and produce the dream that God has for you. Breathing in again, allow yourself to come in touch with the Spirit, that part of yourself that is always perfect. And allow the Spirit to communicate to the mind and the body what it needs for this journey that it is having in this physical existence. build your own self, body, mind, and spirit. Be like a pebble in a great pond of energy, and allow your energy to move forward and ripple outward, and let it touch each member in the room. And joining together, allowing the energy to draw through everyone to facilitate the healing. Taking a deep breath now, think about outside of this room into the community of your family, the community around you, of your teachers and your leaders, and allow that energy to ripple out and touch all of them so that they too may experience the wonderful healing, the wonderful peace. Allow that energy now to go forward into the world and not only touch the world's leaders, but to touch the animals, the vegetation, the waters, the atmosphere, so that they may be healed. And let us be thankful to the animals and the vegetation and the minerals that give of themselves and serve us so greatly and feed us so well. Allow us now to reach out into the universe, into other parts of the universe that we are not familiar with, for many mansions in God's world that we are not aware of every room and every mansion. But we send love and we send caring, for God promises us that love and healing is never ending. And all we need to do is ask. And the energy will follow the intention of the thought. And the healing will begin. Now, as we circle back to the seat of the soul, take a few moments just to sit quietly before you come back to your everyday, workaday world, to enjoy the tranquility and the peace of the healing area of your garden, the inner garden of healing. And know that you may visit here at any time, and God has promised the love and the healing is never ending. So open your hearts, your mind and your hand. God bless you, and He sends His angels to keep after you. Thank you. healing facilitators and the angels and on each side that are helping us bring you energy from God through Himself to help you assist yourself in your healing. And God bless you. Now, Paul has arrived. Everybody's been hearing about this for weeks. And this is Paul Elder. He wrote a book called Eyes of an Angel. And I read the book and got very excited and said to the training ministers, you guys are going to be required to read this book. So you'll really want to hear what Paul has to say about his journey. I don't want to delay that, so welcome Paul Elder. In divine order. This way we got everything out of the way, and then you have the rest of the service other than the tail end of it. So, isn't that great? Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
oh, well, because of the online people.
Okay.
They complain. We don't have to complain.
So sorry that I'm late. God made some perfect things, but He didn't come on BC ferries. I'll tell you a whole bunch of things this morning. One of the things that I tell people, I'm a former CTV news announcer and a former mayor of a Canadian city. The only reason I'm telling you that is because people have a tendency to believe that reporters and politicians aren't the kind of people that would ever stretch the truth. So I just wanted to get... Most importantly, I'm a survivor of 3 near-death experiences. And I always say, lucky survivor. Not because I managed to escape death 3 times, but because I was able to experience that process, that transition for three times. And each of those times was so profound and a really phenomenal experience. Here's some statistics for you. Would you believe in North America alone there were over 20 million people who had a near-death experience? A lot of people. And of course, because science and medicine are able to pull us back from the edge more and more all the time. So a lot of people will have this life-changing, profound experience. It was even more amazing as they calculate that as many as 20% to 25% of all people will have at some point in their lifetime a very profound, life-changing peak experience, whether that be a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience or communication with a loved one that is passed on. What they found out of those many, many millions of people that have had a near-death experience are some very common things. They found that it doesn't matter whether the experiencer is a 4-year-old in California or an old lady in the Soviet Union, that they pretty much describe the same process, the same things. And also they find very often, in most cases, that following a near-death experience, that people become more psychic. It changes their lives in really significant ways, or they become more aware of processing and watching their own thoughts, their own consciousness. And so a lot of people following those kinds of peak experiences have out-of-body experiences. And that sort of was the case for me. Since those experiences, I've had hundreds of out-of-body experiences. And so I went on to write about it, and Hampton Roads in the U.S. publishing company picked up the manuscript and published the book. But a lot of things have changed in my life, going from a life as a businessman and politician to spending time going around the country or Canada and the U.S. teaching classes. I'm now a trainer, a teacher at the Monroe Institute in Virginia. This is sort of, the Monroe Institute is a world leader or pioneer in consciousness research. researching things like near-death and out-of-body experiences. And so now I get to do some pretty amazing things, and I'm very, very lucky and grateful for that. Before I get too, and I don't have a lot of time today, but before I get too far afield, I'll give you a bit of a background about what he said to you, so to have an understanding of where I came from. I grew up on the prairies in a very large German Catholic family, rather strict Catholic. And when you grow up with 10 brothers and sisters, it was 11 of us in total, life has a way of dealing with things, right? So for my little brother and I, we couldn't hear it or see it or feel it. It didn't exist. And so we didn't spend, even though we were forced to go to church and to be altar boys until we were like 14 or 15 years old. I really didn't want to believe, or I should rephrase that. I wasn't so sure that there was a God. At least the kind of God that we were taught about. The kind of God, we had concepts about God, and we all had those, right? Excuse me. And you can't have an experience like drowning at the age of 12 without changing some of your concepts. So you have to re-examine concepts of God. And so I thought that I knew who, as Christians, who Jesus Christ was, that was sort of the guy who looked like the painting my mom had on the kitchen wall. It was this guy that was about 30 years old with interesting eyes. And I knew who God was. That was the stern-faced, bearded, old guy in the Bible who was going to fry my butt. And I was pretty sure of that, because I've been told that many times. But the reality, when we examine it, is to understand our relationship to what God is and who God is. Right? And from my experiences on the other side, the near-death experiences and the out-of-body experiences, to re-examine who we really are. And I come to some kind of conclusions, and these are my truths. I want to tell you something. Everything that I'm about to tell you, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have believed a single word I'm about to say. Right? Even though I'd had some remarkable experiences when I was 12 years old. And do you want to hear what it was like to drown?
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, of course.
It's wonderful. When I was 12 years old, we lived on the prairies, and our parents had warned us. My brother and I couldn't swim like that. Our parents had warned us about staying away from all of these ponds and dugouts that existed all over the prairies. And so one Saturday, my cousins were visiting from Edmonton, and we ended up on one of these ponds. The neighbor kids had abandoned a raft there. And it wasn't long before we were bobbing about in the middle of this 15-foot pond on this raft. And the older of the two cousins, when he realized that we couldn't swim or we were scared of it, he thought it would be great fun to rock the raft. And of course, I fell in. And you know, it's an interesting thing. Because I knew I couldn't swim, I never had the state of mind to even dog paddle or even try. It was simply, I'm toast, I can't swim. And I fell in the water, and immediately my head went below the surface, and I'm floating towards the bottom of this pond. And on the way down, all the air came out, and the water came in and replaced it. And that was such an amazing thing, because I had always imagined that drowning would be a most horrible way to die. And we've all experienced that in swimming pools or in lakes or whatever, sucking in a whole big gulp of water. And that unbelievable reaction inside, the suffocation, the stress of that. But it wasn't like that at all. Once the water but the air goes out and it's replaced by water, it's absolutely peaceful. Your lungs don't struggle anymore. You don't fight for air. And really, I guess it makes sense because we spent the first 9 months of our lives in a liquid environment, in a womb. And so there is no struggle. And to me, it was just such an amazing but peaceful thing. In fact, I was concerned that I should be concerned about what was happening. And I settled into the bottom of this muddy pond. And I could feel my feet sticking into the mud. And I may have kicked or something because I floated back up to the surface for just a few moments and then drifted back down into the bottom of this pond. And I could feel my feet in the mud at the bottom and then my knees as I sunk down. And I was just really, really peaceful. The only thing I wanted to do was to sleep. And of course, that's probably lack of oxygen to the brain. But I just wanted to go to sleep. And so I did. I drifted off. And everything became gray and dark, and I fell asleep. And I'm not sure how long I was gone or unconscious, but I suddenly awoke as one of those and everything had changed. All around me, I was aware that I was still in the water, and I could still feel the mud underneath my knees, as it was sort of hanging, drifting in the mud. But my surroundings had changed. All around me was a bubble, like a bubble of energy. And inside that bubble was every color in the rainbow. And it was such a remarkable thing. And I could feel all of these colors. Each of the colors had a different vibration to it, a different feeling. And I remember standing and kneeling there and just running my hands through these colors and thinking, I didn't know you could feel colors. And orange felt different than blue, and blue felt different than pink or purple. And it was just such an amazing thing, feeling these colors go right through my body and setting up different vibrations in me. And that was so amazing and so strange, and I began to think that this was serious, that maybe I was dying. And, you know, at 12 years old, I had little reference to dying. In fact, probably the only, at that age, the only sort of reference to dying, just a few weeks before this, I had read the book Tom Sawyer. And remember in the book, in Tom Sawyer, when Tom is supposedly drowned in the Mississippi and returns home to his own memorial service at the back of the church. And I thought about that. And the next thing I knew, I went shooting out of the water, just instantly, through the air. And a moment later, I'm floating over the choir loft in the back of our Catholic church out in the country, about 3 feet off the pews, looking down, totally amazed now. I was flying. I was floating, about 3 feet above. And I found that with my mind I could drift and move around just by thinking about it. And I'm looking down over the church, and it's like 16 feet down. And wondering, well, if this is my funeral, where are my parents? Where are all the people who normally go to church? Of course, it was Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Not likely anybody would be there. But I was so mesmerized by this process of being able to float. And I thought, Tom Sawyer didn't fly. I'm flying. And it was such an amazing thing. And I just floated there, absorbing all of this incredible energy. And all of a sudden I felt this spasm in the center of my stomach. And in an instant, I'm back on the shore of the dugout, or the pond. My cousin's got me around the waist, and my face is bouncing in the mud, and he's pumping the water out of me. And it's 6 or 7 minutes later. And my two cousins and my little brother, their eyes were about this big, like saucers, because they thought for sure that I was dead when they pulled me out of there. And it was an amazing thing, you know. So we knew we'd be in big trouble when we got home. And so we made this pact. We'd never tell another soul. And then we walked really slow on the way home, about 1.5 miles to let our clothes dry. And we weren't home for 10 minutes. And I was out in the yard and I heard some kayang and cussing in German coming out of the house. And 2 kids got a good whipping on that day, and I was one of them. Now they teach me to die. So in that amazing process, you know, even though this profound experience occurred to me, and I told my little brother and I told my younger cousin about this, and they must have thought I had water in the brain. Because I was telling them about flying and Tom Sawyer and, you know. And so I've learned very quickly that this isn't something that you tell people because they think you're whacked, you know, especially adults. And so even though this was a very profound kind of religious, spiritual experience, I didn't register it as anything particularly significant in my life. When you're 12 years old and something like that happens, afterwards, everything feels okay. So it's like you say, oh, that was weird, and you go on with life. Right? I never paid much attention to it after that, other than I would never forget it. Right? But until much, much later in life, when I'd had another near-death experience after a heart attack in the middle of a hockey game. Did I tell you about that? I died in a car accident at 17, and then playing hockey, I had a heart attack in the middle of a hockey game, and died and floated through the ambulance ceiling and headed off toward the light. That's what got my attention. Right? And so it was at those stages in life when I found out and discovered how truly significant that event at 12 was. The drowning, the first time when I sort of passed through that veil to the other side. How that had changed my life in ways that I hadn't anticipated or didn't even think about. All I knew, it made me more psychic, but I didn't know what to call it, and I didn't even realize that's what it was. I knew that if my sisters lost things, that they would ask me to find it because I could find stuff. I could see it in my mind somewhere. But that was common. It was just sort of like, it was no big deal. You know? So I didn't pay much attention to it until much later in life. But I want to tell you about an event then that changed my life more than anything else. Notwithstanding the drowning at 12 or the heart attack or this car accident at 17. The first time I had ever heard about out-of-body experiences, I had been watching a television interview with a guy named Robert Monroe. This is back in the 80s. And he'd written a book called Journeys Out of the Body. And I thought, well, that was really interesting. This guy would have spontaneous out-of-body experiences, and he was very deliberate about it. He would record everything that happened and make notes of all of these things. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. So I borrowed the book from the library, and I read it through. And I took it back and thought, interesting, but this guy said nothing. And I pretty much forgot about it. Until one night, 11 years later, I went to bed probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, really tired. And I woke up at about 3 or something. And I thought I'd fallen out of bed because there was something prickling in my back. And I thought, how on earth could this be? I can't believe I fell out of bed. And I opened up my eyes, and man, was I in for a surprise. I wasn't on the floor, I was floating at the ceiling. and bouncing like a balloon against the stipple. It was the stipple poking my back. But I thought I was on the floor. And I opened my eyes and I looked down and I could see myself. Or I should say, I could see my wife in bed. And the first thing that came to my mind was, oh my God, that Robert Monroe guy wasn't nuts after all. This is true, it's really happened. And I could look down and I could see my wife and this other guy in bed with her. For a minute I was sort of like, whoa, did I jump a cog here or something? Until I realized that that's me. And that really is a difficult concept. You know. So I'm floating here at the ceiling of my bedroom and I'm thinking, well, I better get back. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And just with that thought, it was an interesting thing because even though this is the first time I was kind of aware of this, it seemed like this was very common. Like I've done this hundreds of times, thousands of times. And so I thought about floating back to my body, and I floated down towards the bed. And somehow I missed. I ended up floating parallel to my body about 2 feet off the floor and 2 feet away. Just kind of floating like this and looking at myself laying on the bed. You know? Looked like I was completely asleep, my mouth hanging open. And that is so strange to see yourself. We never ever see ourselves from the perspective of somebody else. I mean, other than in a movie or a photograph or something. But to actually see yourself live in a live perspective from as if it was somebody else's point of view. And I'm looking and thinking, God, you look old. And it was such a strange experience. And so I'm thinking, well, I have to get back in there somehow. And so just by thinking that, I started to float and just floated over and I could feel myself enter into my own body. Strange feeling. And when I got inside, there was this snap or a jerking, clicking sensation. And I thought, that's familiar. And so I looked around and my alarm clock said something like 2 o'clock or 3:02 a.m. I think it was. And this incredible surge is flowing through me. Energy, so incredible like I've never felt it before. Every molecule in my body was buzzing, bubbling with energy. And I looked up and I could see the stipple in my ceiling, but I could also see the stars in the sky. I could look right through the ceiling. And I knew that I could do this again, and all of this stuff that I read about Robert Monroe came back to my mind. And I wanted to do this again. And so I simply asked for it, or willed myself, to float out of my body again. And I floated up to the ceiling. In this most incredible surge of energy. And when I got to the ceiling, just floating there, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? Oh, well, maybe I'll try, like what Robert Monroe did, I'll try and go through the rest of the house and float around. So at the ceiling I'm floating, and I turned in the direction of the bedroom door. And I started floating towards it, and I must have been going too fast or something. You know, what do they call it, the door jamb over top of the door? Is that the jamb or over top? The header. Before I knew it, I was going to hit that thing. And so I actually closed my eyes and turned away because I'm going to bang into this thing. And the next thing I knew, I'm coming out the other side of it. And my upper shoulders and my head and neck went through the wall. And I came out the other side and I was totally astonished. Now, I just went through a wall. And I could feel everything. I could feel the drywall, both layers. I could feel the 2x4s as I went through. And I settled down to the carpet outside of my bedroom. Totally astonished at this. Reading about it is one thing, actually doing it is another thing. And so now I'm standing about 3 feet from my doorway in my bedroom, and I can see right back into my bedroom. And there's my body about 25 or 30 feet away. And I'm looking back through that and I'm thinking, how can this be? My brain, the thing that supposedly I use to think with, is over there, and yet I'm standing here, completely whole, and never felt better in my life than thinking. How can this be? And I swear to you, there came a voice around me, or inside me. And this voice said, you are not your brain, you're not your body. You're conscious living energy. And I actually snapped around in a circle to see who was behind me or where they were. Of course, there was nobody there. And this voice sounded really strangely familiar. So after a few moments of digesting all of this that was happening with me, I thought, well, now I'm going to head back to this journey. I want to go through the house or something. And I was standing at the top of the stairway. And just by thinking about it, I lifted off about 2 feet above the stairs and floated down the stairway. And when I got to the landing at the bottom, my toes touched the carpet. And it was like, click, instantly, I'm back in my body. All the vibrations are gone. All the sensations are gone. And it was that snapping feeling, that jerking feeling. And I thought, that's what that is. And we've done that, every one of us, every night when we fall asleep. That's what's happening. How often have you watched your loved ones fall asleep with your kids? And as you drift off to sleep, or they drift off to sleep, get these little spasms or jerking sensations, and it feels like inside going, right? You've all experienced that, have you?
Yes.
I know you have. Right? That's what that is. It's amazing. So the next time you wake up in bed with a jerk, no, it's not me. I know who's waiting for. I don't know. Next time that happens, realize what just happened. That was your energy body coming back into your physical body. Right? When you start to pay attention to those kinds of things, you learn some interesting things about yourself. It does open the doorway for you to examine your own consciousness. Right? So, but there's a whole bunch of things I want to tell you about that are really important. And these are my truths. These are the things that I've learned in hundreds of out-of-body experiences and meeting my spirit guides and being taken through the other side of sort of a re-education, if you will. We all have spirit guides. Probably 2 or 3 or even more. And sometimes they change off over a lifetime. Before we come here, we actually decide the kind of experiences that we want to have. We choose our parents. I know you're thinking, what? What was I thinking? My mother died on her 81st birthday. She died of Parkinson's disease and cancer. So for the last 20 years of her life, she was shaking so badly from the Parkinson's that, and so self-conscious that she wouldn't even go to the house anymore. And she had a very difficult life. We grew up, she raised 11 kids. You know, we grew up on a small farm, a really poor farm, without running water. We didn't have telephone, we didn't have television, or any of those modern conveniences that a lot of people have. Of course, that wasn't so uncommon back, in the 50s and 60s. And she also had a husband who wasn't particularly helpful or caring. And so pretty much she was stuck raising 11 kids by herself. We used to, this is funny, even though that was fairly common back in those days, a lot of people had kids, especially the Catholics. Had big families. And so people would ask, Like 11 kids? How come 11? How come so many kids in the family? Like my little brother and I knew. You know. So we'd string them along. I said, well, it's because their mom was deaf. Every night when they go to bed, my dad says, Mom, you want to go to sleep or what? And she said, what? That's a bad joke. So the rhythm method doesn't work. She had an awful life. And on her 81st birthday, she'd been in a coma for a couple of months, pretty much. And all of our family, the eight girls in a row and 3 boys, all of our family were sort of assembled or gathered in the hospital with her. And the girls had bought a birthday cake for her. And she had been pretty much comatose. You know, if her eyes were open, there's nobody there. You know, for about 2 months or so. And we sang happy birthday to her, and she woke up. Right? Now, I mean, I'm not talking about being able to, because there was tubes and everything else. But her eyes were open, and it was like she could recognize people and smile or whatever. Or at least more conscious. And so this was an amazing thing for us. But we knew it was very close. And so I sat holding my mother's hand. And by then I'd had a number of out-of-body experiences. And I knew where she was going. And my mom was afraid to die. Or at least that's what we thought. We thought that she could have been sainted, and she thought she wasn't good enough to go to heaven. She had obviously heard too many hellfire and brimstone sermons in church. We talk about fear of God, and that is so awful. There's no such thing. But I'll get back to that later. So I encouraged my mother in my mind, talking to her, telling her that she can go, she can let go. And she did, eventually. Within a couple of hours, she had gone on. And although all of the rest of my family, everybody certainly was crying and grieving, for some reason I couldn't grieve. I knew where she was going, and I knew what a wonderful place it was. And I kind of thought we should be celebrating, that she was able to finally make this step. And I thought, no problem, because I can do this out-of-body stuff. I'll find her on the other side. And so after she died, I tried for almost a year, I'll bet. And I just couldn't. And so I gave up trying. And it was about a year after she died, one night, in an out-of-body state, I floated up to my ceiling of my bedroom. And while I'm floating there, trying to think about what I'm going to do or where I'm going to go this time, and I heard someone call my name, distinctly. And I kind of turned really quickly in the direction. And by all that's holy, I swear this is true, and everything else that I'm telling you as well. The wall in my bedroom, it's a large house like that, began to swirl and became transparent or translucent. And just began to swirl sort of counterclockwise, including the dresser that was sitting in front of the wall. And I saw this bright light, or sphere, or oval of light on the other side of this vortex. And then I heard my name again called. And I knew without any question that this was my mother. Excuse me. And this oval of energy came closer and closer until it came right through the wall and met it. And then she took the form, the human form again, but not the shriveled up 81-year-old with cancer. She looked like maybe 35 or 40. Kind of in the prime of her life. And, well, I only tell this about 100 times, and I still get emotional from time to time. So. I was so elated, so happy to see her. And so I went to hug her. And it was so remarkable. And when I did, she said, "Here, it's easier to see you here." And in an instant, we're standing in a park, like on the other side. The way station, the receiving station, if you will, like heaven. And I anticipated a different kind of thing. I mean, it wasn't like mother and son. You know, I mean, there were memories of that, that I had as a child in this moment of being with her. But this was like we were old friends, and we've done this thousands of times, hundreds of times. Different roles. And I became aware of this somehow. But I wanted to tell her, and this is one of the things in my life that bothered me about the crappy life she'd had. And I wanted to tell her how sore that was, that she'd had such an awful life. And she said a strange thing. She said, "No. It was perfect. That's what we wanted." And I actually said, "Woman, what have they done to you over here?" That's what we wanted? And she said, "Absolutely. Before we came here, we planned this out. This is what we wanted. It was perfect." And I just had real difficulty with that. And so she began to tell me, she said, "Yeah, that's how it works." And she said an interesting thing. She said, "Before I was born, I knew how I was going to die." And I said, "Mom, that's spooky." And then I thought about how ridiculous I was. I'm talking to the ghost of my mother. And she explained that process to me, and it opened my mind up. I just had huge difficulties with it. But by then I'd already been visiting with my spirit guide. His name was Meldor, strange name. But it was Billy or Bob, maybe, I don't know. And so, at the first opportunity, I wanted to ask the spirit guide about this. Because what she said would imply that we choose our life, we plan it out. So I asked the spirit guide, and he said, "Of course, that's how it works. Before we come here, we plan the kind of experiences that we want to have in this lifetime. And we take on our spirit guides and make agreements with them to come with us to make sure that we experience the things we want to experience." And even talking about dying, before we come here, we may lay out several opportunities to leave. 4 or 5, perhaps. And depending on our growth or where we're at the particular time, we can take one of those opportunities to leave. So for me, it could have been the drowning when I was 12, or the car accident at 17, or the heart attack at 41. Obviously, I still haven't learned enough. but we choose the kind of experience that we want to have. You see, we have this concept, perhaps from the Bible, or concepts born by religions, that we all have guardian angels, and that's true. And that our guardian angels are there to protect us from harm. Well, if that's the case, we got a sorry bunch of angels. Because we've all experienced tough stuff. Right? Well, the reality is that the angels are spirit guides at the same time. Aren't with us to protect us from certain things. They're there to make sure that we experience what we want to, or what we decided on experiencing before we came here. And that certainly opened the door for me. And he said an interesting thing, because I was just blown away by this. Like, why would anybody want to do that? Why would somebody want to grow up in Africa, for instance? And for every day, for 3 years, they're starving to death until they finally die. Why would anybody want to do that? Why would anybody want that experience? And he said an interesting thing. He said there is a virtual lineup of souls on the other side waiting to incarnate into the bodies of handicapped babies. Or people who will become handicapped at some point in life through accident or illness. A lineup wanting that. And I couldn't grasp that. I thought, why would anybody? How? I couldn't do that. And he said, well, considering what you know now about it, that we planned this out, who do you think that's for? Consider the growth for the individual, for the spirit who decides to do that. But who's it for? It's a sacrifice mostly for the loved ones, the caregivers, who wanted that experience somewhere in life. So, I had a huge problem with that. And I have a friend back in Swiftcurrent, Saskatchewan. It's a small city where I was mayor. It's about 18,000 people. And his name is Peter. Peter has 2 twin boys, he and his wife. They were born normally, and after about a year, I can't remember what the illness was or what caused it, but they became basically quadriplegic when they were about a year old. And now they're like 42, 43 years old. And so for 42 years, Peter has been changing diapers and looking after his boys. You could not find a more positive person on this planet. You see Peter on the street, and this is Peter. How are you? Great day to be alive. 100%. Always. And you see him, and he's taking these 2 boys in their wheelchairs to hockey games, and he holds their drinks so that they can sip out of the straws, and takes them to the bathroom. Does everything with them all the time. And he has just such a positive attitude. I don't think I could do that. I don't know how I could possibly do that. And the only sad moments that Peter has, when he considers that he's now moving into his 70s, what's going to happen to the boys when he can't look after them any longer. Peter thinks he was blessed. He thinks that his life is a blessing. That he could, how could you have that kind of an intense relationship, intimate soul relationship with another being? is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. I guess it changed. It made a lot of sense to me eventually. So I think we have to consider, when we look around us sometimes, to sort of put these things into perspective. Consider some of the saints or the angels that we have in our presence. Whether they be in wheelchairs or otherwise. Part of a sacrifice that they made so we could have this experience, whatever it was. So I find that reincarnation is how this all works. And I wouldn't want to believe in it either, raised as a Catholic. I was actually floating through walls, meeting with spirits in the spirit world, and somebody would mention reincarnation. I go, oh, that Eastern stuff. So we hang on to the things, our own sort of belief systems. Until I had some powerful experiences that showed me that we come back here hundreds, thousands of times. We do this for the emotions involved, and for mostly the powerful, powerful feelings and emotions that we can't have on the other side. I mean, this sounds hokey, but on the other side, in the spirit world, other than love, or concepts of love, we can't have this kind of experience other than vicariously. We can't experience hatred, or intense fear, or lust, sexuality, all of those wonderful human emotions. That's what we come here to process. And when we look around us and we consider our lifetimes, relatively, it's so easy when you think about it, right? I mean, we could be living in Africa with a 3-year life expectancy, starvation. And so we look at that and we think, well, we got it really easy. It's just different. It's not necessarily easier. From a spiritual perspective, from a physical perspective, it's a different story. But I can tell you one thing, someone who's starving to that every day of their life, they're living from a different place. Right? Their experience is a more immediate experience of suffering, or whatever. We, in sort of our privileged societies, if you will, we live from a different emotion, a different angle. We don't have to worry about where our next meal is coming from. In fact, that's all they have to worry about. We deal with the emotional stuff. That can be very, very powerful experiences for us. So I want to tell you about...
Well, we would have to wrap up pretty quick, so yeah.
Right.
Well, we want to have time to talk to Paul, don't we?
I want to tell you about our concepts of God really quickly. Okay? Remember I talked about, that I knew who Jesus Christ was, that was painting on the wall and stuff. But you can't have experiences like this without experiencing a different reality about who God is. And from what I've discovered and found is that God is not a personal being. God is not someone you can pray to on Saturday night to help you win bingo on Sunday. The reality is that we are all aspects of God. We are all a piece of God. And the best simile that I can use is comparing it to consciousness. All of consciousness is God. Right? So if consciousness was the ocean, we are the individual drops in the ocean that makes up the ocean. But each one of us carries the DNA and the blueprint for the entire ocean. So collectively, we are God. We designed this. We're God's attempt at continuing experience and completion. There is no such thing as a punishing God or a judgmental God. There isn't. I experienced a past life with you, and we all will, I can guarantee it, when we pass over. Somehow, every single thing that we've ever thought, said, or done is stored energetically on the other side, somewhere, somehow. It is the Akashic records, or whatever you want to call it. Every thought. Because energy can never be changed or never destroyed. It can be changed. But I want to tell you just quickly and briefly about this. Our concept of God. Here's just a quick example. Here's a scenario for you. So you've got a kid who grows up in the ghetto somewhere in the world, right? His parents are alcoholic, drug addict, spending most of their time on the streets. Tough life. Right? This kid is left to live by himself, left to grow up by himself somehow. And so, throughout his life, the kid learns how to survive. Steal, hurt, cheat, doing whatever he can to survive. And then one day when he's 15 years old, he's shot dead in the street. Now, are we to believe that then some God comes along and says, after that really crappy life that you stole and you hurt and you did bad things, so off to hell with you? No God I know. You wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. God does not judge nor punish. We all have absolute free will, and we do this. One of the agreements that we make with people when we come here to experience the things we want to experience, we also make agreements with the people who are going to push our buttons. All right? And perhaps those are the most significant experiences, the ones that were just, Here's the definitive statement of reincarnation. You know what that is? Oh, it's you again. We make agreements with so many different souls. Ever wonder why, in reincarnation, we hundreds, thousands of times we come back here. Ever wonder why you meet somebody for the first time, you look into the eyes and it's like you know them forever? Like they're old friends? And then you also meet people and in 30 seconds you want to slap them. And that's what it's from, is that soul recognition. And it's in the eyes. But very quickly I want to tell you about the dying process and the past life review. Everything that we ever say, do, is somehow stored energetically on the other side for our benefit, for our reflection. And so when we die, we have the experience of watching all of this and seeing what we've done, where, what, if we wanted to achieve or experience the things we wanted to do. And I'm going to tell you about a couple of things or a couple of events in my life review that were really astonishing to me. And these, I'm only, this is a very personal, very emotional thing that we're all going to go through. And I picked up two things, and I'm going to tell you about them only because they were the first of sort of significant things. It's like all the moments of your life are passing like a videotape or a photograph album through your mind. And at any time, you can stop the process. And you can take a look, you can examine that piece of your life. Right? So, this was the first thing that I stopped in my process. I was probably 11 years old or something, in the schoolyard, over a noon hour or something. And there was this yappy little kid who was just a pain in the butt and always in my face. And anyway, he thought it would be really fun just with me 3 feet away to take the basketball and go, "Here, catch." And he hit me right in the nose. And I just had it with this little beggar. And I knocked him down. I knocked him on his butt. And I jumped on top of him and I was going to wail the snot out of him. And I couldn't do it. And I felt every single emotion. I relived that event. I mean, it had been many, many, many years earlier, and I'd mostly forgotten it. I relived everything about it, all of my emotions, my anger, my hurt, my embarrassment of having tears in my eyes because I'm 12 years old and I'm on a playground. And somebody's going to pay. And then something happened. And I began to feel everything this kid felt. All of it. I became this kid. And I felt his emotion, and his humiliation, and his hurt, and being mad at himself for doing such a stupid thing. All of those emotions. And I knew I don't need Jesus Christ to judge me. I don't need God to judge me. This kid is judging me. I'm judging me. Don't need anybody else. Now when this process happens, I mean, depending on your belief, if you want Jesus Christ to be with you, he will be. Or Muhammad or Buddha or Krishna. This is the experience that we can have. But the judgment does not come from them, but the judgment comes from inside. There is no hell. Plain and simple, there is no place, there is no hell, other than the ones we create. We do it ourselves. If we feel that we live bad lives, we isolate ourselves for a period of time. But I want to, and we're all going to go through this, but I don't want you to be afraid of it, because there's some wonderful things in this process as well. And one of the things that happened that I'm going to tell you about, it was so innocuous that I had completely forgotten about it. In the city where I was the mayor, there was a local fellow that was known or rumored to be really abusive and beat up his wife and kids on regular occasions. And one morning, I walked out of City Hall and just kind of ran into this guy. And this isn't his real name, but I just chatted him up and said, Mr. Dirksen, how are you? How's the wife? How are the kids? You know, we chatted for a couple of minutes and he went on his way. I did not remember this event. It meant nothing to me. Right? But then I got to experience the other end of it. And I got to experience the scenarios that will work out in all of our lives from some innocuous little act of kindness. And it's sort of like this. So maybe on this day, Mr. Dirksen doesn't go home. He slapped his wife home. And maybe Mrs. Dirksen doesn't take it out on the kids. Maybe the kids don't take it out on their friends in the playground. And I got to see how just an innocuous little act like that could spread through so many souls. How that could make a difference in so many lives. So there's some wonderful, wonderful things about it. We planned this out. So, of all of the things I've ever experienced on the other side, this is what you'll see like when I want you to remember. This is sort of like the message. That when we're buried, and our bodies are dead and in the ground because we aren't, right? There's no such thing as death. But when we make that transition, it won't matter one little bit who won or who lost or how rich or famous or how successful. The only thing that you will be concerned about is how you treated other souls along the way. So let me chill.
That was something else, eh? Oh, everybody ready to get the book now? Yeah, it talks about a lot more in the book. We'll just take about a couple of minutes to do the offering. And while we're doing that, then I'm going to get you ready for about we have only about 5 or 6 minutes that we can ask questions. I'd rather have a question in a period than the clairvoyance as such. And we'll have maybe a 8 to 10 minute question period. Okay? Number 21, if everybody wants to join in singing our beautiful offerings. generosity from everyone here, from their time, energy, and money. We ask that you guide the chief people of the church in using these funds to the highest and best for the purpose of everyone concerned. Well, anybody that's excited now would like to put up their hand and ask Paul a question. Okay? Okay. Would you like to ask Paul a question?
First of all, thank you very much for your talk. And secondly, I'm very familiar with the concepts that you've discussed, and one of the questions that I've never really known how to hold is that when we come back another time, because we seem generally to have no knowledge of the lessons that we've learned in our conscious life, how do we incorporate them, and how do we not make... I've always thought it would make much more sense to remember what we learned on a conscious level, and so that we don't have to struggle and go through the same things again. So how do we know that we're always moving on? And if you really behave properly this life, then this is better than what you did before. do you understand what I'm saying? So I don't know what the purpose is of not knowing, is basically what I'm saying.
The question, I'll just repeat it, is how do we know we're progressing in the right direction if all of this knowledge is taken away from us while we're being incarnate? The only way it will work, the only way this immersion course works, is if we think for something. We have to, to some degree, all this has to be taken away when we come here. But if we remembered, we wouldn't do it as physical beings. We'd say, hey, deal's off, man, I'm changed this stuff, this hurts. At least that's the sense that I have of it. Because we really come here for each other as well, in soul groups. All of us we're all part of groups of souls who are so alike in harmony and vibration that you could literally wake up in one of their bodies and not know the difference. And so there are schools of thought. People think that all of these lifetimes happen at the same time. Right? That is there only now. I don't really buy into that. This world is very real. The experiences are very real, and they have to be. In order to make it real for us, we come here to experience it. And it's not necessarily about becoming better individually with each lifetime. We come here to experience. And part of that experience might be to assist someone else, or to be the pain in the butt to someone else. So if we come here and we plan these kinds of things in lifetime, and so we will do some bad things in life. So this is one of the concepts when I first heard about this, that there is no judgment, there's no punishment. So when I talk about this, people will ultimately say, well, so what are you telling me? I got to be a bunkmate with Hitler on the other side if there's no judgment and no punishment? And I asked my spirit guide that, because I was very concerned about that. And he said, okay, well, considering what you know, that we plan out these things. And you will go through a life review at the end of it all that can be so difficult. He said, knowing this particular instance, I talked about Hitler, you've got an individual, a spirit, who's going to come into this world knowing that he will go down in history as the most hated and reviled being that ever inhabited a body. Pretty much. Changed history. He said, what kind of a soul do you think it would take to do something like that? That puts a whole different perspective on it, doesn't it? Knowing that when he passes on, he's going to put himself in his own hell for a long time. This is the experience that we have, and all of us, none of us will be completely happy until we are all, what you refer to as God realized, or as total vibration. Right? So we come here And we make a round sometimes we're the parent, sometimes we're the daughter. If in this lifetime, and karma, we talk about karma as being good or bad things, and there's no such thing as anything in force. We all have free will. So we hear people talk, oh, hey, that's some big time karma for next round. It's not really like that. Karma is just experience. It's not necessarily good or bad. So in this lifetime, say somebody is an abusive person, a womanizer, may very well choose in the next lifetime to come back as a woman who puts herself in a position of being abused. And we learn all of the different aspects of being human.
Anybody else
Makes
has
sense.
another question? Go ahead.
I'd just like to know if, I've read in different books that there's the other side and all that. I've also read about dark souls. Is that a real thing?
You're talking about Sylvia Brown?
Yeah. And different ones too, other
I
than...
understand that. Unfortunately, sometimes the message gets a little bit skewed. All right? There's no such thing as dark souls. I mean, I know Sylvia talks about that, 70% or 30% of the world's population are dark souls and they'll never get to heaven, and that's just crap.
Just crap. Good
That's
to
crap.
know. Thank you.
Because they also talk about suicide in those terms. I mean,
Yeah.
Those of us who were raised as Catholic many, many years ago, there were some pretty solid beliefs about suicide. That if you committed suicide, you go to hell, directly to hell.
Yep.
Right? Well, that's not true in any way, shape, or form. Right? And so some people, like Sylvia says that her spirit guides, tell her that when people commit suicide, they're headed off to the past. They don't even get to go to the other side. They're sent back, in vitro, back to life again. And that's not absolutely, no one else has ever written that, and nobody believes it, and neither do I. That's not the case.
I would agree with that too, that this other side is, we go there and we are aware, and at that point we have a pure spirit, which was there before we came, so we're back to pure spirit again. So I don't think anybody is left in the dark place.
Even if you, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if you consider suicide, and how awful that is, that kind of emotion that goes with it. There again, who's it for?
Us, I know that.
For the loved ones that are left
It
over.
might be experience for us, and they chose to do that. Yeah. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Are there dark forces that try to keep you working for the light?
I've in the many out-of-body experiences and other, there is no devil. All right. There is no Satan. That is simply man-made construction. That's because we got somebody to blame it on. The devil made me do that. There are. I didn't mean Satan. No, I understand that, but you're talking about just dark sources or dark souls and stuff. There are misguided, confused souls on the other side. All right. Some of them who, just because you die doesn't mean you become a saint. Right. So some people struggle and hang on to earthly things. Right? And this is an important thing, and I'll just very quickly tell you about this. When you reach the other side, we still hang on to earthly attachments of certain things. Right? To illustrate that, I'll just quickly tell you that. I'm sitting in City Hall one day at the end of the day. It's about 4:30 in the afternoon. And closed the door, and I thought, I'm going to have a nap. And so I kicked back and I lay back in the chair, and pretty soon I feel the vibrations and I float out of my body, out through the ceiling of the City Hall. And it's a really nice sunny summer day, and so I floated down to the end of the street, and there's this big old bar that we had in Swift Saskatchewan. And I thought, I wonder who's in there. And so I floated through the wall of this bar, into the bar, there's like a dozen people maybe. The usual suspects, getting greased in the middle of the afternoon. And at one end there's a round table, and this guy is just completely plastered. I mean, he's sitting and hanging right down, over his drink, and he is virtually unconscious, drunk. And I see another guy behind him. And I think, whoa! The guy behind him doesn't look like he's, I think, that's a spirit. And this guy is standing behind this completely drunk guy. And while I'm watching, I floated over and I'm kind of watching this closer. And the spirit walks up behind this drunk guy and goes, and he sinks down into this guy's body. Just for a second or two, and then boom, he flies back up. And I went, whoa, what am I seeing here? I couldn't believe this. As he comes back again, he goes, just like he's dipping in, he just dipped into this guy's body. And I thought, he's trying to feel the drunk, the alcohol, that feeling. Obviously, he died as an alcoholic. And he's hanging around bars trying to get that hit. And he did this 3 or 4 times. You see, you can't occupy somebody else's body without permission. So it was sort of like he would be there for a second and slip back up. After 3 or 4 times, this guy, the spirit, is visibly staggering. And I float over and I'm really close and I'm just sort of mesmerized watching this. And he looks up and he sees me. And he stands there and he goes, he turned and walked right through the wall. And I just went, oh, and in a second I'm back in my body and I just got the finger from a ghost. So I think the message in that is that, deal with your stuff while you're alive, because it's hard to do on the other side. You're still going to take that with you.
Whatever stuff it is.
Yeah. And if you're a bully in this lifetime, you might still want to live off people's fear a little bit on the other side.
Does that mean they haven't made the transition?
No, most of them have. Some don't. Some people don't realize. Some souls don't realize that they've died. So they're sort of stuck in that moment for a while. It's a very traumatic, very unexpected kind of thing, right? But some do. It's just that you can't get that. You still. It's like everything is there. All of your wants, your desires, and your yearning. Here's the other side, and here's angels, and here, and spirit guides and stuff to sort of reacclimate you. But if you're really addicted to something, it can hold you back for a while. So deal with your stuff, okay? Before you go.
Well,
Yes.
with our conscious awareness on this physical plane, how can we break vows or contracts that we've made on the other side that we feel like we don't want to proceed with those agreements here? Because we're more aware, instead of just blindly going through.
The question is, can we change our contracts or change things that we wanted to experience? And I think that's true. But you see, our spirit guides will help to make things happen that we wanted to experience. I mean, the fact is, as physical beings, I can say, no, I don't want this anymore. This cancer is really nasty. Or whatever it is. Right? But it's not just this physical brain or the physical being that wants that. We have options. We lay out options, and we can change. We don't have to be a victim, for instance. We can grow out of that. We have the ability and the consciousness of freedom of choice to move out of that. Right? So, nothing is set in stone, but generally speaking, what we plan out, we will experience. And our spirit guides are there to make it happen. And just to sort of quickly illustrate that, how many times you've heard this on the news? Somebody will say, well, I went to work every day for 20 years the same way. Last Friday, for whatever reason, I don't know, but I went around the other way. I got to work and there was like a tanker exploded at that corner. I could have been killed. That's not coincidence.